In response to our warfare video, a bunch of you guys recommended we watch The Outpost, and by God was that a good suggestion. The most obvious similarity between these two movies is that they're both minute-for-minute accurate depictions of catastrophic battles that occurred during GWOT, and just like Warfare, The Outpost did not hold back for a moment. This movie does not pull any punches, and it's incredibly effective at punching you in the gut. Unlike most war movies, it doesn't depict death as a noble, heroic thing. It's, in fact, very dirty and unceremonious, boiled down to just being a combat casualty. Before the battle begins, the plot is perfectly balanced between the events preceding the battle, slowly showing us all the faults of Cop Keating and the mismanagement at the hands of officers, after which it delves into the bloody chaos which only ever happened because of the aforementioned mismanagement. There is perhaps no movie that captures modern military culture and lingo as well as The Outpost, and here's why. Even though most veterans praise this movie for its highly accurate loadout and combat realism, which we'll definitely get to later in the video, this movie does not get enough praise for its world building. Most Hollywood writers have trouble coming up with genuine dialogue, which is why conversations and banter between soldiers usually sound clunky and campy, only saved by the performance of actors. The Outpost, however, does not miss a beat regarding general aloofness, lack of seriousness, and relationship dynamics between men on deployment.
Delighted, sir.
Jesus, Youngster, get your fucking head down.
Carter?
For example, this little moment here and the comment from an older, experienced soldier are just top-notch. You're not supposed to salute officers in combat zones because that tells the enemy sniper who the commander is, and Younger is a little bit green, which makes for a great moment of high realism. There's also the moment Gallegos does this to Younger because moments before, Younger set up a position with Gallegos in his field of fire, which is a great way to shoot your own guys. Then there's this scene, in which Younger gets caught, how do we say this without YouTube banning the channel? He gets caught manhandling the ham candle to a photo of Sergeant Hart's wife, who then punishes him with push-ups. This is something that Jarhead also goes over in its plot, and yes, we know Jarhead is another great war movie. We see your comments and we'll get to it at some point in the future. First of all, holding the bald man hostage several times a day is absolutely realistic. Soldiers on deployment probably have the greatest daily average of penile dishonorable discharges out of anyone on the planet. They're bored, they're tired, it's been a long time since they last saw their wives or girlfriends, in some cases both, and they have enough pent-up testosterone to repopulate the planet in case of an apocalypse. Unlike this channel, they're not shooting blanks. Secondly, you do not ever leave a photo of your wife or girlfriend unattended on deployment, especially if the photo is provocative. That's just common sense, and if a photo goes missing, that's on you. Finally, it is 100% real for Hart to punish Younger with push-ups as if they're back in boot camp because there's really no other option for him. If he shoots him or beats his ass, he's going 11 worth. The thing that makes this scene absolutely peak and even more realistic, however, is Younger accepting his fate and leaning into the joke even more.
It's Mrs. Hart! I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart. Are you?
The inner workings and relationships of a platoon at some point become a never-ending circus filled with a bunch of clowns always trying to one-up each other, almost religiously refusing to take anything seriously, and that's fantastically depicted in The Outpost. The goofiness is, of course, very similar to the aforementioned hand-to-gland combat. It's just a way of dealing with the boredom, the stress, and the possibility of dying at any given moment. Aside from the dialogue itself, which is absurdly accurate and develops the relationships before our eyes, the physical world building is also incredibly on point. This is a great example of that because anyone who's ever served will testify that the bottom side of every top bunk slat has something written on it, and the ones that don't are probably brand new and they'll get tattooed soon enough. There is also the infamous shit pit, officially known as a burn pit, where feces are disposed of by burning them. They are absolutely disgusting, and as the guys discuss while they work, burn pits really can cause a bunch of health issues, which wasn't at the time. Also, the fact that they smell horrible afterwards sounds about right.
That's good. Oh, shit. God damn, Mace.
The partly improvised gym and the random local dog being adopted as a mascot are also accurate details. The final world-building puzzle this movie includes are the rank dynamics and how soldiers and NCOs generally feel about brass, and often with good reason.
Bros,
Yeah, risk life and limb, but just not his own.
Fucking officers.
As Martin says, he's risked life and limb, not just his own. Then, later, the very same brass wants that LMTV moved back to Narai. It's clear that everyone, including Captain Keating, knows how stupid and dangerous it is to move the LMTV back and forth, and yet Keating doesn't flinch.
Guys, brass gave us a mission. We're gonna deliver like we always do.
And that's just the way it is. It's the unofficial job of soldiers and NCOs to validly complain about stupid ideas from high-ranking officers. And it's the job of the on-site officers, who are also well aware of the stupidity of those ideas, to leave common sense at the door and follow through with the orders. It's made clear that the men appreciate Captain Keating because of how much he cares for them while also doing his job right. When he dies while moving the LMTV and after his replacement gets killed by an IED, it's also made very clear how much they dislike their third CO, Captain Broward. Unlike Keating, Broward interacts very little with his men. He's more concerned about respecting top brass than he is with running the outpost. He refuses to do anything about the outpost's faulty defenses they tell him about, and he refuses to leave the TOC, so much so that he urinates in bottles and has someone pick them up and throw them away. He also shoots the dog, the camp's mascot, and agrees to compensate the locals for an alleged killing of a family member, which never happened. Because of this, the men call him Broward the Coward, and when Carter brings it up with Lieutenant Bunderman, the second-in-command defends him because if there's one thing worse than a bad CO, it's mutiny and sedition.
Better never, ever hear that fucking nickname again. From you or anybody else.
This is, once again, right on the money. No matter what happens, an officer will never let a senior officer be disrespected in front of him, even if the lower-ranking officer himself partly agrees with the sentiment. With all of this in mind, the Outpost builds a perfectly realistic military setting. And it's not only realistic, it is real. The three commanding officers we see were all really in command, and their on-screen fates are depicted exactly the way they happened in real life. The reason the world building, the dialogue, and everyone's feelings are so accurate is because actual soldiers from Camp Keating took part in filming this movie. This, for example, is the real Ty Carter. Brad Larson was portrayed by Lieutenant Henry Hughes, who really served at Camp Keating, and Specialist Daniel Rodriguez appears as himself. Aside from the men who served there being on set and undoubtedly advising on which changes to make, a huge chunk of realism weight falls on the director's shoulders. Rod Lurie is a West Point graduate who served in the US Army in the 80s, and you can tell just how much respect he has for the people who served at the real Camp Keating. The highly accurate depiction of the events is only reinforced by the era-accurate loadouts. All soldiers carry the M4A1 carbine, while Carter carries an AR-15 that was made to look like an M4. You can easily tell the difference in this still if you take a look at the barrel. That's not the heavy barrel we have on M4s. The M4s are equipped with side-mounted lasers and ACOG scopes, while some of them also pack the M203 grenade launcher. There are precisely two mistakes in the movie revolving around the M4. For one, they're all fitted with either TA-01 or TA-31 scopes, both made by Trijicon. This is what the TA-01 reticle looks like. This is what the TA-31 reticle looks like. In real life, however, Afghanistan-era M4s were most often fitted with the TA-31 RCO, and that reticle looks like this. And this is the reticle we get in the movie. Very close, but no cigar. The other issue is the use of the M4 on behalf of Latvian instructor Sergeant Janis Lakis. First of all, there were two Latvians at Camp Keating, but it's understandable that the movie didn't insist upon it because they're side characters in an already pretty densely packed movie. However, Latvia's service rifle was the H&K G36, specifically the G36V and KV, not the M4. Not only can this be confirmed through a quick Google search, but it was also confirmed by Clint Romesha himself. Lakis is carrying the wrong weapon in the movie. The M240 is also a big player in the movie. This 7.62 by 51mm machine gun was designed in Belgium in the late 1950s, and it was introduced as a tank gun in 1977, but it has spread all across the United States military ever since. The variation we see in the movies is the 240B, which was configured for ground combat with a buttstock and a bipod, while you can also mount it on vehicles, aircraft, and boats. Unlike the 240G, its predecessor, 240 Bravo comes with a hydraulic buffer in the stock that helps relieve the recoil and makes it easier for the machine gunner to control the gun. The 240G also came with 3 gas settings, which allowed the machine gunner to choose between 3 fire rates, ranging from 650 to 950 rounds per minute. The 240B has a single gas setting and a single gas regulator, limiting its rate of fire between 550 and 650 RPM. But the gun has overall better longevity because of the reduced stress on the action. This thing is heavy, coming in at 27.6 pounds with a total length of 48.7 inches, and that's not even accounting for the ammo. However, it's going to rip the head off of anyone dumb enough to pop up in its 2,000-yard range, so the price the operator pays in sweat is more than worth it. The legendary Dragunov is another weapon that stands out in the movie, specifically because it's at the center of one of the most audacious individual actions performed by any combatant in this battle. Romesha uses it to take out an enemy sniper who already shot a few other soldiers, and this is something that really did happen in real life. SVD Dragunov is a legendary sniper rifle that was developed in the Soviet Union in the early 60s. And if your first thought upon seeing the sniper rifle is that it looks like a member of the AK family, your eyes aren't deceiving you. Although the weapons aren't related in any way, they're aesthetically similar because the USSR wanted to uniform the handling and looks of all their firearms. If you've ever shot an AK-47, congratulations, you also know how to shoot a Dragunov. Aside from handling, however, the two systems are largely different. Dragunov has a short stroke system and the AK has a long stroke gas piston. It's also a very long gun at 48.2 inches, which is just half an inch shorter than the 240B mentioned earlier and about 9 inches shorter than the Barrett 50 cal, which in itself is a huge rifle. It's just slightly heavier than the Mosin Nagant at 9.48 pounds, but unlike the legendary World War II sniper rifle, it's auto-loading and easier to handle and maintain. The Mosin Nagant was, of course, limited by the technology of its time, and if you want to deep dive on it, make sure to check out our Enemy at the Gates video. Dragunov was taken into service in the USSR in 1963, originally issued with the PSO-1 sights, which are actually the sights we see in the movie. The general doctrine at the time was to focus on shot volume instead of accuracy, and Dragunov's ability to fire 5 shots before reloading increased its rate of fire dramatically in comparison to its predecessor.
Would you like to learn how to shoot?
I can't already.
Oh, I saw. It's very American. Fire enough bullets and hope to hit the target.
This change in doctrine has proven to be somewhat true. Soviet Dragunov operators were tasked with peppering valuable targets such as officers, artillery scouts, and machine gunners in order to assist regular infantry. The former East Germany introduced 1,750 Dragunovs into service and did extensive testing on the sniper rifle, finding that good marksmen had a 50% hit rate on man-sized standing targets at around 800 meters. That hit rate grew to 80% at 500 meters and 90% at distances up to 200 meters. Because of its accuracy and rate of fire, which were very impressive 60 years ago and remain impressive to this day, the gun spread all across the Eastern Bloc, Asia, parts of Africa, and South America, and even some Central European countries that aren't historically friendly with Russia, such as Austria and Czechia. To this day, it remains one of the most common sniper rifles in all conflicts over the past half a century, and it's still in use to this day, most recently in the Russo-Ukrainian War. Because of its connection to the Soviet Union and its use in its many proxy wars, we'd normally expect the Dragunov to be used by the Taliban, so it's pretty interesting we see it used by American troops in the movie. The Taliban in the movie almost exclusively used the AK-47 and its Bulgarian derivative, the AR-M1. The latter was probably used because there weren't enough AK-47 replicas available, but it's not historically inaccurate because the gun was used in Afghanistan by the police force, so it's not unrealistic for it to fall in the hands of the Taliban. The movie was also shot in Bulgaria, so the gun was easily available on location. The final weapon we'll talk about is the M120 mortar. As the men themselves say, the mortar is by far their most powerful weapon because of the Outpost's terrible position, and if it gets taken out, they're basically toast. The M120 is, as the name suggests, a mortar firing 120mm high explosive projectiles. It's of Israeli design, weighs 319 pounds, and requires a 5-man crew to set up and operate, although a well-trained team of 2 can do the same, but with a lower rate of fire. This thing is essentially a highly explosive sniper in the hands of skilled operators, and it's highly effective against infantry and light vehicles within a 7-kilometer radius. From the very beginning of the movie, we're getting bombarded with 2 bits of info. For one, it sucks being stuck at PRT Kamdesh, which was the outpost's name before being renamed to Camp Keating. Secondly, the camp's location and layout are disastrous.
Aren't we supposed to be on top of the mountain to win this thing?
Don't be logical, Scooza.
Yeah. Just the way it's shown in the movie, the real Camp Keating was located at the bottom of a valley, surrounded by mountains and water from all sides, effectively giving all high ground to the enemy. You don't need to be a full-fledged general to figure out that you should never concede high ground in a battle, but there is some logic to that decision. The decision is the result of COIN strategy, which is an acronym for counterinsurgency. Broadly explained, without getting into the nitty-gritty, the strategy dictates that troops have to establish close relationships with local representatives, especially the elders who are traditionally the decision-makers in Afghanistan. The locals don't live in the mountains, they live in the valley. You can't build a friendly relationship with the locals you're trying to educate and help build a democracy if you're taking up a position far away from them for protection. Secondly, this camp was supposed to prevent the smuggling of guns and ammo from Pakistan into Afghanistan, and building a camp at the intersection of 3 valleys used for weapons smuggling is a good place to start. Placing the camp in a strategically terrible position to fully immerse the troops with the locals and keep a finger on the gun smuggling pulse was a calculated risk that the decision makers were aware of, and it resulted in disaster. Camp Keating wasn't the only outpost located in such a terrible position, and after the tragedy that struck it, a decision was made to abandon and destroy outposts that seemed indefensible. The men complain about it too. They're aware that they're in a death pit and that whenever they're attacked, they're on the back foot by default because of the steep angle, with the mortar being the only weapon that can effectively fight back against the high ground. Way before the final battle ever begins, Romeshay lays out how he'd attack Camp Keating if he were a Taliban.
And I'd hit our generator. Effectively kill our comms. And then I'd start sending fighters on the switchbacks.
This is pretty much exactly what happened. When the Taliban attacked on the morning of October 3rd, they focused all their mortar and RPG fire on the mortar pit, putting it out of action immediately. OP Fritsch, which was the closest outpost to Camp Keating, was attacked at the same time, preventing the troops there from aiding the men at Camp Keating. It took no more than 48 minutes for the 300 to 400 strong Taliban force to overrun Keating's 97 defenders, 42 of whom were Afghani National Army, and breach the wire. Both Latvian instructors testified that the Afghani troops displayed horrendous cowardice, and not only did they immediately run away, but they even stole some private belongings of American soldiers on their way out. Those belongings included digital cameras and protein shakes, because the average Afghani soldier apparently doesn't have the balls to fight for his country, and he still wants to get swole and film his fitness journey. American troops collapsed to 2 central buildings and formed a perimeter before they started to push out and retake the outpost. They managed to fight the Taliban off, and the majority of the Tali force was eventually killed by attack helicopters, fighters, and bombers. The QRF arrived just as the last Taliban were leaving the fighting area. The course of the events that day was depicted precisely the way it happened, and this movie is entirely accurate in that aspect. The only thing they didn't show is the fact that OP Fritsch was under attack too, but that's only important as an explanation as to why they were left with no support, and it's not that relevant in the big picture. Once the dust settled, 9 Americans were dead and 27 were wounded. When we focus on the smaller things in this movie, we can confidently say it deserves nothing but plaudits. Small unit tactics with basic covering and moving are very well depicted, and the logic behind each individual's decision-making is made very clear to the viewer. There are moments when troops hide in their Humvees, and there are moments when they run into open fire without any attempt to hide behind cover. Both decisions are perfectly logical in their reasoning. The weapons handling is also superb, but what really makes this movie stand out is how underwhelming the deaths are. There's no "tell mama I love her." There are no moments of grandeur, selfless sacrifices, screaming as the character runs at the enemy, or dying a heroic death. The death scenes we get are brutal and toned down in a dramatic sense, which actually achieves the adverse effect. It makes them more real. When they get shot, the soldiers just drop and stay on the ground. We don't even get to see some deaths, we just get told that someone's dead. This general lack of information and formality surrounding death makes it hit harder. You just realize that one moment someone's there, and then they're just gone. Soldiers usually don't even get a moment to make peace with death before dying. And in that sense, this movie is the exact opposite of most Hollywood productions. Even the movies that depict tragic events usually make the deaths dramatic and courageous, but the low-hitting subtlety of The Outpost is just something else. There is perhaps one moment of campiness in the entire movie, and that's Romeshay saying,
Not today. Romeshay! Sergeant!
And while Romeshay really did prove instrumental in retaking the camp, the line "not today" stands out a bit because nobody talks like that in real life. Aside from that, not a single line of dialogue or a tough decision-making moment in the entire movie is out of place. Another trick the movie pulls is the sheer length. The battle itself amounts for almost half the movie, and similar to how it works in Black Hawk Down, you, as a viewer, become mentally tired of watching so much death. The level of destruction after the battle is astounding, and the depiction of PTSD comes entirely out of left field because you never see it coming. You generally expect the movie ending with the battle. Instead, we get Carter, whose growth and development we followed the most throughout the movie, breaking down because of Mace's death. Using that as a baseball bat, the movie closes with one final punch to the gut. Giving this movie anything other than 10 out of 10 for historic accuracy and combat realism would be worse than breaking the Geneva Convention. Okay, maybe not that bad, but not far from it. The Outpost does not drop the ball, nor does it miss a beat at any point in the movie. Its world building is top tier, the combat is about as real as it can get, and it manages to effectively pack 3 years worth of events into a 2-hour movie without missing out on any historically important info or misrepresenting anything. The thing we have to point out the most, though, is just how immersive and accurate the military world it builds is. Forget about the battle and the combat for a while. If you've never been in the military, watching the first half of this movie is about as close as you can get to it without applying for one of those embarrassing masculinity camps they have nowadays. When it comes to weaponry, we're going to disregard the slightly wrong reticles on the ACOG scopes because that's such a minor mistake it doesn't really matter for immersion. What does matter is the wrong weapon on Lacus, who should be carrying a G36. For that, the movie gets a 9 out of 10, but don't let that take anything away from it. This is one of the most sincere military movies made in recent times, and it can't be brought down by a simple mistake. What did you think of The Outpost? Did you spot the similarities with Warfare? And was the subtle, grounded realism as impactful for you as it was for us? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you guys on the next one.